The film opens with Eve Macaro at a hospital, bloodied and holding a spinning ballerina toy. A flashback reveals Eve living peacefully with her father Javier, until one day, armed men arrive to hunt him down. Javier hides Eve before eliminating the gunman. Their leader, the Chancellor, confronts Javier, claiming that Javier stole his wife, who was part of their cult, causing her death. The Chancellor gives Javier a choice. He can kill himself so that Eve will remain unharmed, or if he kills the Chancellor, both he and Eve will die. Javier prepares to take his own life, but Eve cries out, causing him to hesitate. He kills the gunman before they can reach Eve, but is shot in the process. Javier manages to get Eve out of the house just as a bomb explodes, killing the remaining gunman, except the Chancellor. Javier eventually succumbs to his wounds in front of his daughter. At the hospital, Eve is approached by Winston Scott, who offers his condolences and an opportunity to be taken in by her father's extended family. She agrees, and Winston brings her to the home of the Ruska Roma to meet their leader, the director. Eve also meets Nogi, who tells her about the Kikimora, mythological spirits that can be either good or bad depending on the host. Over the next 12 years, Eve trains under the director as a ballerina while also learning combat and firearms from Nogi. She trains until her feet bleed, striving for perfection, and gradually becomes a lethal assassin and host for the Kikimora spirit. However, she has few friends. Her only close bond is with another young woman named Tatiana. One day, Eve notices Tatiana's belongings are gone. The director informs her that Tatiana was let go because she lacked the resolve to do what the Ruska Roma do. The students are stunned when John Wick visits the compound, seeking help from the director during the events of John Wick, Chapter 3. Eve approaches him and asks how she can get out into the field like he does. John tells her that it's always a choice. She can walk out whenever she's ready. Eve is sent on her first mission, to protect a young woman named Katla Park from an assassin named Song. Eve finds Katla at a nightclub and watches as Song and his men approach. She intervenes, fighting and killing them. Before stabbing Song repeatedly with the peen of a hammer. She successfully escorts Katla to safety. 2 months later, Eve completes another hit against a group of men in an apartment. As she leaves, a van crashes into her car, and 2 armed men attempt to kill her. She quickly dispatches them and notices one of the attackers has an X-shaped scar on his wrist, the same mark as the men who murdered her father. She cuts off his hand and brings it to the director for answers. The director confirms that the mark belongs to a cult, but says they have a truce with the Ruska Roma and stay out of each other's business. Therefore, she cannot help Eve pursue them. Determined, Eve goes to the Continental Hotel and checks in with Sharon before finding Winston. Though Winston warns her not to get involved with the cult, she hands him the gold token he gave her years ago. Reluctantly, Winston agrees and assigns her to find an assassin named Daniel Pine, who may be able to help. Eve tracks Pine to the Continental in Prague. After infiltrating his room, she finds his young daughter, Ella. She and Pine draw their weapons on each other, but eventually lower them when Eve explains she's only seeking the cult. Meanwhile, in the hotel lobby, a woman named Lena, who works for the Chancellor, calls him to report Eve's presence. He orders his men to go after her, despite knowing that spilling blood on Continental grounds is forbidden. To raise the stakes, the bounty on Pine's head is doubled to tempt others into breaking the rules. Some gunmen attempt to breach Pine's room, but one is killed by a booby trap. The remaining 2 are confronted by Eve and Pine. After a brutal fight, Eve, Pine, and Ella flee the hotel, but are ultimately ambushed. Eve and Pine are incapacitated, and Ella is kidnapped. Eve wakes up next to 2 cult members. Since she didn't break the rules by killing anyone on Continental grounds, she is spared execution. The other 2 aren't so lucky. They are gunned down in a hail of bullets. The hotel owner then informs Eve that she must check out. Later, Eve visits a gun shop owned by a man named Frank. While he shows her his weapons, cult members suddenly open fire. Frank is shot in the hand, but Eve swiftly eliminates the attackers. Grateful for her help, Frank reveals the rumored location of the cult's hideout, somewhere deep in the Austrian mountains. Eve travels to the remote town of Hallett, which secretly houses several assassins. She enters a tavern, but her presence is soon discovered by cult operatives. A brutal fight ensues, and Eve takes them down. However, the tavern's employee, Agatha, alerts more cult members. Eve engages them in combat, killing Agatha with a shot to the head. In the basement, she finds guns and grenades to continue the battle. Though Eve manages to kill most of the attackers, she is eventually overpowered. Her jacket is ripped, revealing her Ruska Roma tattoo. This confirms her identity to the Chancellor, who has been pursuing her. He arrives alongside Lena, and drops a shocking revelation. Lena is Eve's long-lost older sister. She resents Eve because Javier took her away to give her a better life, leaving Lena behind to grow up inside the cult. Lena also blames Javier for their mother's death, claiming she was killed after leaving the cult for a member of the Ruska Roma. The Chancellor also reveals that Ella is his granddaughter and that he plans to raise her as an assassin, claiming she was chosen. Unlike the Ruska Roma, where students make their own choices, the cult exerts full control. The Chancellor orders his men to kill both sisters. Grenades are thrown into the room, Lena is killed, but Eve miraculously survives. The Chancellor contacts the director, declaring that Eve's actions are an act of war. Although the director insists she never sent Eve, the Chancellor gives her a deadline: either stop Eve by midnight or face open war between the cult and the Ruska Roma. Eve arms herself for a final stand. John Wick appears, sent by the director to eliminate her. Eve refuses to back down, and they fight. Their duel ends in a draw. John, impressed by her resolve, agrees to let her confront the Chancellor, provided she finishes the job before the deadline. Eve returns to the town just as the Chancellor unleashes every assassin he can find. Armed with a flamethrower, Eve incinerates wave after wave of cultists. Then Dex, the Chancellor's right-hand man, arrives with his own flamethrower. With her fuel depleted, Eve grabs a fire hose and deflects Dex's flames until they're face-to-face. Just as Dex is about to strike, John snipes his fuel tank from afar, causing a massive explosion. With Dex gone, Eve charges forward. The Chancellor, now desperate, attempts to escape with Ella. His men are quickly gunned down by Eve until only he remains. He starts monologuing about how killing him won't change anything, until Eve interrupts with a bullet to the head. Eve rescues Ella and reunites her with Pine at the hospital. John contacts the director to confirm the mission's outcome. Eve is alive, and the Chancellor is dead. Later, Eve checks into the New York Continental and attends a ballet performance, where she sees Katla dancing. As she watches, a new contract notification appears on her phone. A $5 million bounty has been placed on her head. She notices other audience members receiving the same message. Realizing what's coming, Eve leaves the theater quickly, disappearing into the night. If you enjoyed this recap, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel. Thanks for watching.